Hi there! For those of you that don't know me yet, my name's Chef Maggie Westcott from The Alternative Dish. I'm the writer, recipe creator, and photographer on AlternativeDish.com. So today I'm going to be teaching you how to make some roasted apples and carrots with a maple mustard glaze. Delicious. So let's get started. So we're going to start by cooking our quinoa, and if you're not familiar with quinoa, this is like a grain, but it's actually a seed, and so it's good for people if they can't normally eat grains. You can use quinoa and often be okay with it. And this is what it looks like before it's cooked. So there are these little tiny seedy looking things. And this is what it looks like after it's cooked. So it triples in size when you make it. And so when you're cooking quinoa, you want to do a kind of a 1-to-2 ratio, 1 cup of quinoa to 2 cups of liquid. You can cook it in water or broth to kind of amp up the flavor. And so you just pour that into a pan, bring it to a boil, and then reduce it to a simmer for 15 minutes. Quinoa is great because it's a super quick cooking grain, and it's highly nutritious. It's full of protein, iron, fiber, and just really, really good for you. So, we'll get that going, and then we'll move on to the next part. Okay, so this recipe calls for carrots, apples, onions, and garlic, and all of which we're going to chop. And so we're going to start with the carrots. And so my philosophy on carrots is you don't have to peel them unless it's for aesthetic purposes. And so for this particular recipe, I'm not even going to peel them. I just gave them a good scrub before this, and then we're going to chop them up. So I'll make a little room on the cutting board here so you can see. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut it on the bias, which means cutting it kind of sideways like this, and that gives you bigger pieces, bigger surface area of the carrots. And we're going to chop these pretty thin, about a 1/4 inch thick, because we want them to cook at the same rate as the apples. So when we chop the apples, we'll cut them into about 1-inch pieces. Apples cook a lot quicker, so we want them to kind of cook at the same rate and be done at the same time. So I'm chopping these carrots on the bias about a 1/4 inch thick, and as you can see, that really makes the surface area a lot bigger than if you just cut it straight like that. So that's what cutting it on the bias means. So I'll just continue doing this until we get to the end of the carrot, and when you get to the end, you'll have this little nub here. You can either eat it or just give it a little chop, whatever you want, and then just throw the root away. So there's our carrots. Next, we're going to do the apples for this recipe. The recipe calls for 3 large apples. My apples are pretty small, so I think I'm going to do 4 of them for this recipe. Just kind of eyeball it. Whatever you have on hand, just go ahead and use them. And so the easiest way to cut the core out of an apple is just to cut around the core. And so I just make 4 cuts right around the core. And then you have the core left, and you can snack on it a little bit, throw it away, whatever you want to do. So we're going to cut these into bigger pieces, maybe about 1 inch big. So I actually think, because these apples are so small, I can just kind of cut them into quarters. And so I'm just going to take, oh, I got a little bit of the core in there. Oops. Okay, so we're just going to cut these into 1 inch pieces all the way around. And we're good to go. So I'll finish the rest of the apples after this. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to chop our onion up. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off, there's the root end, and then there's this other top end, and I'm just going to cut that off and toss that, and then turn it over. So I now have a nice stable work surface, and I'm going to cut right through the root end. So cut right through the root of the onion, and that makes the skin super easy to peel off. Just pops right off. And then we have a nice surface to work with on our onion. And I'm going to cut these into slices, and I kind of like to cut them pole to pole, so from the root end to the top. And so I'm just going to cut and just cut up, just up to the root here, but not through the root. And then you can see I have these nice slices of onion that are still attached here. And then I'm just going to cut off the root end right where I cut up to it. And now I have these nice, easy slices of onion, okay? So I'll do that with both halves of the onion. And we got our onion chopped in no time. Ta-da! All right, so the last thing we're gonna chop for this is the garlic, and I'll show you a quick and easy way to get the skin off the garlic. So I just start by cutting off the root end right here where it's attached to the bulb, and you can toss that. And then I just take the edge of my knife here and I press down on it like that, and the skin just falls off. Perfect. And then you're just gonna kind of dice this the best you can. And you're done, and repeat. Okay, so now I have the carrots, the onions, the apples, and the garlic all chopped up. I actually already threw the garlic into this bowl where our marinade is going to be. It was about a 1/4 cup of garlic. There's a lot of garlic in this, but if you're not a huge garlic lover, just use what you want. And so in this bowl, I have some grainy mustard. I really like grainy Dijon mustard with the little seeds still in it, but you could just use Dijon mustard too if you prefer or have that on hand. Then I have the garlic. I have a little maple syrup, or you could also use honey. Either one is just fine. I've made this both ways. It's delicious. And then I have some aquafaba in here. And I'm going to tell you what aquafaba is. It's magic. Aquafaba is the liquid from a can of chickpeas, or the water after you've been cooking it. And you can substitute this in recipes for lots of different things. You can whip it up like egg whites. You can use it in lieu of eggs in baking. And then you can also use it in lieu of oil in recipes. And so there's a 1/3 cup of aquafaba in here. You could also use olive oil if you wanted to. But my little push for aquafaba is that it's barely any calories in it at all. A 1/3 cup in here, a 1/3 cup of olive oil is about 700 calories and 70 grams of fat, I believe. And this is none. So great way to reduce your calorie and fat intake in a dish like this if you want. So that's my plug. So aquafaba, mustard, garlic, and maple syrup in here, or honey, whatever you have on hand or whatever you want to use. I'm just going to whisk that up. Smells so good. Oh, and there's a little salt in there as well. You can put salt and pepper just kind of to taste. And then I'm going to take all of these carrots and apples and toss them in there. Make sure these onions get a little separated. And we're going to toss them in this yummy mixture. So I'm just going to take my spatula and give it a toss. Make sure everything gets nicely coated. And then we're going to stick it on a baking sheet with parchment paper. And I am going to highly recommend that you don't do this recipe without parchment paper, because I have made that mistake in the past, long ago. And it sticks to the sheet pan. It's a mess to clean up. So just get your hands on some parchment paper, and you're going to be glad you did. So now I'm just going to dump all of this onto the sheet pan here. And don't leave any of that maple mustardy sauce behind. And just spread it out on the sheet pan in a nice even layer. And then we are going to roast this in the oven at 400 degrees for 15 minutes. And then I'll take it out and just kind of toss it around to make sure that it's not sticking and that it bakes evenly on all sides, and then bake it another 10 minutes. And we're just going to bake it until the carrots are tender when pierced with a fork, and the apples are the same way. So here's what they look like. It's a gorgeous dish. So I'll throw these in the oven, and then I'll be back. Okay, so our carrots and apples and onions just came out of the oven, and they smell so delicious. They're still pretty hot, but that's okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take the quinoa that I made, and I'm going to pour this into a bowl. And then I'm going to add the carrot mixture. And here's a little tip when you're using parchment paper. You can kind of pick it up from both ends and then just dump things in. Still a little hot, but it's okay. So then it's just a quick, slick way to get things in there. And then I am going to add some chickpeas to it. And so these are optional, but I like to add some more protein. And then I'm going to mix this all together. So we're mixing the quinoa in with the carrots and the chickpeas, and it just smells so good, and it's fragrant. I don't know if you can see that. And so at this point, this can either be a main dish or a side dish. So whatever you want it to be. This, if in a bigger portion, this would be really excellent served next to a nice big green salad, enough for a meal. Or you can just serve it as a side dish, just like this, next to whatever you're eating for your main course. And so what I would do is I have some toasted pecans here, which complement this dish really well. And I would just sprinkle them on top if you're going to be serving this kind of as a side dish, or if you're going to be serving it as your main course, go ahead and sprinkle it on top after you put it on your plate. However you want to do it, just so you get some pecans sprinkled throughout there. So there you go. Really quick and easy way to make this dish. Maple mustard roasted carrots and apples with chickpeas, quinoa, pecans. So enjoy making this on your own. Bye.